right, here we go. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by Volteo Tequila. Super premium 100% blue agave. 100% additive free. Reading this RobReport.com article. Dak Prescott gets in the tequila business. And we love Volteo Tequila. Reposado and Blanco. The Cristalino's good too. We may have had a shot of that with Dak the Super Bowl week when we went to that party. But we're live in the Bank Plus studio, Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. And we welcome in Dallas Cowboys Insider, RJ Ochoa, blogging the boys. Does a great job on Twitter and covering the Cowboys year-round. And they just traded for George Pickens, wide receiver from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and now he'll be joining the Dallas Cowboys for a third and a fifth pick. Is that right? Did I say that earlier? Yeah. RJ will correct me if I'm wrong there. So RJ joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. RJ, what did you make? I know he's got a little bit of drama in him and maybe a little bit of prima donna, or some people would argue a lot. But what do you make of the trade, Pickens to the Cowboys?
Well, good morning. It's great to be with y'all. I think that, this was pretty predictable or pretty telegraphed. I mean, neither of those words are completely accurate, I would suppose. But this felt obvious, I think, especially after the way that the draft went. And so I think that, a little bit of a saying of mine is that multiple things can be true. And it's certainly true that Pickens is an extraordinary talent and that he has a lot of skills that can help a football team. But to your point, at the very least, there are questions about his abilities to harmonize in the locker room. And, that's, if the Philadelphia Eagles want to take a chance like that, they've earned the benefit of the doubt with the collective kind of public. But the Cowboys, I think, have burned up a lot of benefit of the doubt. And they've spent a lot of this offseason trying to build some goodwill back up with their fans. And you can argue that they've positioned themselves to be able to take a risk like this. Or you can argue that it's a first-time head coach, and doing something like this is a bit of playing with fire. And so I think this really is a matter of, are you a glass half full, glass half empty person? I would not have done this particular move personally. I obviously recognize that the Cowboys have a need at receiver, a self-induced need for what it's worth. But it's difficult. It's difficult because, again, you can talk yourself in circles if that isn't obvious by now.
Okay. So RJ, you're not real high on this. So what do you give it? Like a B-, C+? Where are you?
I think that depends on how you're grading it, right? Like from the compensation standpoint, did they, is this the Jonathan Mingo trade or the Trey Lance trade? No, right? Like it's laying up on a par 5 type of, fine. But and I would offer that it is an extraordinarily high reward, right? This dude can play some football. We all know that. And you now have not only made your football team better, but you've made CeeDee Lamb better. You've made Jake Ferguson better. You've just, given this car a NOS boost. So yeah, I think I lean D+ right now. It's difficult for me to go all the way up to an A. The pushback I've seen on social media so far this morning is from a lot of fans who want to give it an A. And I recognize that they have, they've acted like adults, this offseason, I guess is the most blunt way to put it. This is, you've been acting like an adult, but we're at the local bar at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday and you're here right now. Like, what's going on? This is a little bit of a step back in the wrong direction. Just a teeny bit, but it isn't 2 a.m. You know what I'm saying? Like there are multiple levels to right and wrong in this scenario.
Okay. I saw some other people talking about the trade, and we're visiting with RJ Ochoa, Cowboys Insider, blogging the boys. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Some other people were talking about how with Dak being a veteran and such a locker room leader, that if anybody could handle George Pickens and his drama and prima donna, then it could be Dak. You agree with that or disagree with that, RJ?
I think that's a fair estimation as far as Dak's abilities as a leader. And again, this is where, that's why we have conversations and we apply context. I would say that maybe that's unfair, to put yet another thing on Dak Prescott's plate. I mean, and have known for longer than better than I, about Dak's abilities as a leader and ability to rally not just a team, but a community of people. And so, yeah, I completely trust that. I would offer that he is way more suited than whoever you want to pick out of Pittsburgh, Kenny Pickett, spin the wheel, whichever quarterback he was playing with was. Even Russell Wilson, who I think is maybe a little bit underrated in the leadership category. But again, the entire offseason to date for the Cowboys has been about team captains and cornerstone players and dudes of that cut. And that's not to say that George Pickens can't become that guy, right? Like, we all change and evolve, and a change of scenery could certainly offer something different. Maybe he becomes, more of what we identify to be that archetype. But to answer the question, I think that Dak is very well suited to rally dudes. And I think that the Cowboys, you could argue the reason they've built this kind of culture over the last few months is to be able to absorb somebody like George Pickens. Maybe they weren't positioned to do something like that in the past.
Okay, one of your colleagues, James Slater, tweeted that, people have been wringing their hands for them to do something other than like Jonathan Mingo, which I'm not even sure he's a wide receiver 3 in the NFL. So they get George Pickens, who's actually talented, but like you said, has baggage. But she said there's been some people who believe that they do need a little bit of an edge, just a little drop or two of bad boy in the locker room. As somebody who's covered the NFL for a while, do you buy into that? How do you see that? Like that, I know that is a fine line and balancing act in an NFL locker room, RJ.
Yeah, I think it not to ride the fence, but it does depend, right? It depends on, your coach and your quarterback, cornerstones of your team. And, there was the story last week about Brian Schottenheimer rearranging some of the locker room, positioning. And the reason for that is you position, or at least the Cowboys do, your leaders or whatever, near the entrances and exits. That's just kind of the blunt, meaning of it all. But, I mean, in Cowboys past, they made this argument. These are wildly different situations, to be very clear. I'm not comparing them, but they made this argument about Greg Hardy, over a decade ago. They made this argument about Rolando McClain to some level. And those players, or at least Rolando McClain, had a really nice initial season for the Cowboys. And so, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? Like, we've seen other teams, do that, and we've seen it work out. But we've also seen it crash out, right? We've also seen it burn and fail. And that's where, my stance is I agree with the collective that the Cowboys have inched their way closer to competency this offseason. And I think I've given them a lot of credit. I think they deserve a lot of credit. And I don't think that this ruins all of that. But, man, I mean, this is, you're learning how to walk right now again. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to the physical therapy and learning how to walk. And right now you're not even saying, oh, well, I'm ready to run. You're saying, like, no, I'm ready to ride a motorcycle. Like, this is a very different thing. And they might be ready for it. You know what I mean? Like that is very possible. But this is just not a team in a situation that I would entrust that to personally. That doesn't mean it's impossible that it works out. But it is bold, and it is daring, and it is cunning. And I think that, in that respect, that the trade, deserves some applause. And it also is the result, and this is where it is still a cyclical issue for them. It's the result of not, doing their work in other areas. If you just sign a receiver in free agency, I don't mean to say how easy that is. You don't have to do this. I mean,
right.
We're also talking about a team that now doesn't have a third-round pick next year, And so if you just get off the couch sooner, you don't have to keep playing catch-up like this. And so maybe they are learning these lessons, and it's just taken them forever. But everybody is pointing out, oh, well, they really needed this, and you're upset that they addressed it. They did address it, but again, they dug this hole, right? Like, they're painted into a corner, but they held the brush the entire time.
That's a great way to frame it up. All right, I want to do this. This is one of our shorter segments, and thanks for coming on with short notice. I want to get you on in the next week in one of our 30-minute segments. RJ, we appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good rest of the week.
RJ Ochoa, manager and editor-in-chief of Blogging the Boys, covering the Dallas Cowboys for SB Nation. Follow RJ on Twitter at RJ Ochoa. Does a great job covering the Cowboys. It's brought to you by Volteo Tequila. All right, somebody wanted me to spell Volteo, the new tequila that we have on the show. Volvolteo. Yeah, and according to this RobReport.com article, Dak Prescott gets into the tequila game, and we are excited to have Volteo on the show. It's delicious. 100% blue agave, 100% additive. Something happened. All right. 100% additive free, 100% blue agave. We are the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 1059. The way up. We are the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 1059 The Zone.
Saban for storied history.
Yep.
Over the years, I think. Do you guys still communicate?
Yeah. Yeah, we do. He's not a big like text. Things that aren't changing. And then I like got a text like 2 years ago from him that said good luck or something like that. And I was like, to the group, I was like, dude, I got a Saban text. Like, this is amazing. This is like Vanderbilt beating Alabama. Like, this isn't supposed to happen. Never thought I'd see this day. And then Kirby's like, yeah, I got one earlier this year too. Like, he's like learned how to text, just like you get 1 or 2 words. But that relationship's like,
Yep. Just let him know we'll call him back.
the relief.
All right, good morning. Welcome in. We are the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 1059 The Zone. And sorry about that. Jackson threw something at our board because he wasn't happy about the Dallas Cowboys trade for George Pickens. And the thing just shorted out. And he had to go underneath the desk over there. And I think he poured a Busch Light on it. And it started working again. So it's amazing what happens when you're a professional engineer. Holy hell. All right, sorry about that. We welcome in Charles Huff, the head football coach for Southern Miss. Had a good run at Marshall and was also at Alabama and Mississippi State and Penn State. And Huff joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Charles Huff, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, guys. How you guys doing? Doing great, man. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Well, thanks for it's been too long, and thanks for hanging out with us. Congratulations on the job. Look, I get that Southern Miss is a good job. You're in a good spot. You're in the heart of the Sun Belt, in the Sunshine States, tons of athletes, all of that. Wonderful community. We're down there all the time. But why was it time to make the move from Marshall to Southern Miss? Huff?
Well, I think, I've always said I'll move to the next job when the ability to sustain success is gone. And that doesn't mean that, a program is not supporting or whatever that may be. It just means that in order to be able to do what we kind of reached the mountaintop to do, the ability and what was going to need to be poured in and what was going to need to be brought in to sustain that level of success, there were other options to put ourselves in a better situation. The relationship I had or have had with Jeremy, in the past, their vision for the things that they were trying to infuse into the program with this new college landscape from a resource standpoint, from an NIL standpoint, facilities-wise, was much better. A lot of people look at it and say, well, why would you go to a 1-11 program, when you leave a championship program? It's not about the current state of the program. It's about where you think you can take it. And I think we can take this place to a really high level. I have a lot of familiarity with the state of Mississippi. Obviously, my time at Mississippi State, there's phenomenal people in this area. Football is important in the South. There's a ton of recruits within earshot of this campus. The location makes sense from a year-round recruitability standpoint. So there were just a lot of things that, poured into things. I think everyone always kind of says, all good things come to an end. I think we did a really good job at Marshall. They were great to us. But it was time. When you look at where college football is going, what you're going to need to be able to do to sustain success, we had to put ourselves in a better situation.
Charles Huff, the new head football coach at Southern Miss on the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 1059 The Zone. This interview is brought to you by Spring Street Cigars in Hattiesburg. Beautiful place, great place to enjoy a cigar and a beverage right there in Hattiesburg. And the new Spring Street Cigars is open in Jackson, too, and it is a super cool cigar bar and lounge. All right, Huff, I feel like – so I follow you on Twitter, obviously, and y'all have done a good job. The program and the fan base needed some energy and electricity, so you brought that to the table. But I feel like y'all land a transfer every day. Do you know what number y'all are at right now as far as the transfers this year?
Yeah, we are at, I've got it right here. We're going to be at 49 and about, we're at 49. We'll be probably close to 60 when all this is said and done.
Wow. Okay, so, I mean, this is a total roster flip. And
yeah,
talk about that.
And yeah, I think, obviously where we are in college football, you can change and have immediate return on investment. The old way would have took 2 or 3 years to get a recruiting class in, and maybe you develop guys, and you kind of gradually improve. Well, now, and I think Indiana and Kurt Signetti have shown that you can get an immediate flip. I'm not sitting here saying we're going to go 11-1 or do whatever Indiana did, but we will be able to infuse immediate talent, immediate culture, immediate discipline into the program. So we're going to be able to completely change the roster. I think it's almost like the NFL. You take over a team and there's no salary cap.
Sure.
So you can go out and kind of revamp the roster the way you want it. That was a big piece of why I decided to come here, not looking at what the current situation was, not looking at what the current record or roster was, looking at the ability to make roster decisions, looking at the ability to recruit guys to a phenomenal, campus and facility and area of the country. So we're going to be close to 60. We may have maybe less than 15 or so, players from the old Southern Miss team that we'll bring in, and then we'll have another, 10 to 12 high school guys that we'll bring in to kind of complete our 85. But that was the mindset. The mindset was, can we go there and completely flip this roster resource-wise? The ability to go out and attract the right talent. I think us having success at the other place kind of gives us a little bit of validity. I tell people all the time, and this is not me being boastful or cocky, I'm working on practication. I'm not working on theory. I'm working on things that I know have worked in this league at this level. From a resource standpoint, I know what is needed. I know the type of players you need to win in this league. Now, does that mean we sprinkle fairy dust over these guys and they go out and play perfect? No, we still have to coach and develop and get them to do what they're supposed to do. But from my experiences at the other place, I know what it takes to build a successful program in the Sun Belt.
Charles Huff, with head coach for the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, he's going to bring in 60-plus transfers and totally flip the roster for Southern Miss. Had a great run at Marshall and was with Saban and Alabama and MSU and Penn State with Franklin. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. So what's your approach on being able to get that many guys and get the cohesiveness and the chemistry? How do you expedite that process now in college football, like today through Labor Day when y'all face Mississippi State?
Yeah, it's a process, and our process and my thought process as we go through this is the first thing you have to do is you have to give everyone in the program a chance to conform, right? You got to give them a chance to conform. You can't assume that just because they play college football at a good university that they know what discipline means, what accountability means, what a standard is, and those type of things. And that's not a knock to any other coach. That's just, you got to give people a chance to conform to your ways.
Sure.
Right? So you also have to give kids a chance to conform to your schematical implementation, right? Our schemes, our football, how we run things, the fundamentals, the techniques that we teach. Doesn't mean that what they've learned or what they know is right or wrong, just what we do, right? So once you give them a chance to conform holistically, hey, this is how we, conduct ourselves. This is how we play the game. This is how we play offense, defense, special teams. Then you have to make a decision. Okay, are they going to be able to create value for themselves and the university? That means a player may be great. He may conform, but if he's a wing T quarterback, we don't run wing T.
Right.
Okay, so you got to move him on, right? So it's not a magic formula, right? You got to move him on, and you got to be honest with the kid and say, hey, look, you're not going to have an opportunity to play as much because of whatever it may be. Right. Once you do that, then you start bringing in the guys that fit your culture, your schemes, your discipline and all those things. We use obviously with us bringing so many players with us from the other place, we use our players to determine who fits our culture. So obviously we bring the kids in, we watch the film. Hey, here's a great X, Y, and Z player. All right, when he goes and hangs out with our players, they have a role. Does he fit our culture? Coach, he's a great player. He doesn't fit our culture. Okay, we don't take him. Coach, he's a great player. He'll fit in great. Okay, once you do that, then you start forming the team. And that's where I think a lot of coaches in today's, way of college football are going to have to make some quick decisions, right? How do you form a team in 6 months? Obviously, you got to get to know each other. So you got to spend time with them. We've changed how we, vacation. Typically, as a coach, you leave for the whole month of July, take a deep breath with your family, come back and you get rolling. Well, we don't do that anymore because we can't be away from the guys for a full month when you only have really 2 months to get ready to play. So we've changed some things internally. We've changed some things of how we, help the players to get to know each other. And then what you have to finally decide is, okay, it's not about having the best players in the boat. It's about having the right players in the boat. And how do you decide that? When you're going through the recruiting process, for us, if a kid's starting the conversation about NIL, he's not the right player for us. We don't have a ton, right? So if you're looking for, Bugattis, Lamborghinis, and those type of things, well, you may be a great player, but you're not going to be a great player for us because we don't have those things.
Sure.
Right? But if a player is looking for an opportunity, a player is looking for the ability to create value for himself, he wants to be coached hard, he believes in discipline, and he believes in being successful on and off the field, well, then now we can help those type of players. Do we have some NIL? Yeah, we're in a really good spot for our level, right? But we're not going to be able to compete with Ole Miss. We're not going to be able to compete with Mississippi State from an NIL perspective. So those kids will never be able to fit here because he's always going to be looking for his paycheck. So once you kind of do that and you make sure that the staff understands those things, you make sure the players understand those things, and then you get to the point where you get a group of like guys that have the right mentality that can go out and execute on Saturdays.
He is Charles Huff, head football coach for Southern Miss, year one, totally flipping the roster. He joins us on the Out of Bounds show, brought to you by Spring Street Cigars in Hattiesburg. Okay, Huff, who is your general manager that's helping you? I can't imagine what kind of screens and whiteboards and all sorts of things y'all got going on, but who's your general manager that you're working with every day to put the roster together, Huff?
Yeah, Reed Grable is my general manager. He's a guy that has been with me for a really long time. He started out as a graphic intern for us in the recruiting world our first year at Marshall, and he kind of worked his way up into the DPP role. He kind of worked his way up into the recruiting coordinator role. And let's be honest, right? Everybody has this pretty term of GM, but unless you're Belichick and you got Lombardi or you got Nagy, you really have a director of recruiting, right? So let's just call it what it is. Now, the way we do it is we have some very strict parameters on player profile. I learned this when I was with Coach Saban. Every position has a well-defined physical, emotional, mental, the whole nine makeup. If they are a certain position and they are not a certain height, weight, and speed, we don't take them. Because I still think to the core of college recruiting, you have to have those parameters. What I think has happened now is when you infuse money into that, it's okay, who's the best player we can buy? And you start to take players that don't necessarily fit your parameters. We still stick to those parameters. Coach Saban taught us, hey, if you're a corner, you got to be, 6'1" plus, you got to be 200 and some odd pounds, you got to be able to play man, play the ball in the deep part of the field, and tackle. Obviously, we don't get 6'1" corners here, but we've converted that to our level. And what happens is we eliminate missing. And that's where, Coach Saban said it on, ESPN, a couple months ago. You can pay the wrong player. Well, the way you pay the wrong player is you throw out this bunch of money because he's a quote-unquote good player. He doesn't fit your parameters, so he can't play your schemes. He's not flexible in your schemes. So that's what we do. Obviously, we don't have the money to go out and pay the best whatever, so we stick to our parameters. So that way, we always have the right guys in our building for the schemes that we run. And I think that's what's helped us have, sustainable success. Some programs, they can just go out and spend $40 million and next year spend 40, next year spend 40. We don't have that ability, so we have to be a little more creative in how we do things.
He's generated a ton of excitement in Hattiesburg. Head football coach at Southern Miss, Charles Huff, joining us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. All right, I know this has been talked about forever, but you coached under Nick Saban, and it may have been what you just described as far as the strict parameters and the player profile that was developed and cultivated over his tenure at Alabama. But if you could pinpoint one thing, Huff, on why he was so successful for so long, what would it be?
Yeah, it would be just discipline and consistency. That's the thing that everyone talks about. But you want to talk about a man that was so consistent in his process, everything. You know, I tell people all the time, he used to wear the same clothes every day of the week. Like Monday, he'd wear black pants. Tuesday, he'd wear blue pants. Wednesday, he'd wear gray pants. Thursday, he'd have on the brownish color pants. Friday, he'd have on a suit. Every single day. It was almost like clockwork. And it's obviously not that he doesn't have money to buy new clothes. It's just the consistency in his lifestyle with everything that he talked about with the players, the discipline to do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. Those are the things. I'll never forget, we were there. It was the COVID year. And obviously he got COVID. Sark's taking over for the team. I believe we're playing Auburn. And we have a Friday team meeting. Well, every Friday he wears a blazer and coat and tie. So he's at home. He's going to Zoom into the team meeting on Friday because he's got COVID. So the coaches, we're all sitting there saying, there's no way he's going to show up on this Zoom with a coat and tie on sitting in his living room. So we're taking bets. You know, there's guys going around saying, bet you he does, bet you he doesn't. Sure enough, screen pops on. He's got his coat and tie on sitting in his living room.
Unbelievable.
Because the consistency of his routine didn't change because he was at home with COVID. It was the consistency of the routine. Today's Friday. When I have a team meeting on Fridays, I wear a coat and tie. We go to the hotel. So those little things that I took from him, not from hey, we run this kind of defense or that kind of defense. It was strictly the consistency and discipline in your routine. And that's everything. Your schedule, your way you recruit, how you talk to the players, how they work out, all of those things.
Man, Huff, we got to do this again. Congratulations. I mean, I didn't get close to everything that I wanted to get in and talk about, but Charles Huff, the excitement's there, the energy's there in Hattiesburg, new head football coach at Southern Miss. Huff, thanks so much. I look forward to seeing you soon. Let's do this again soon, okay?
Thank you guys, man. Appreciate you having me on.
All right. Thanks, Huff. Charles Huff on the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. He's going to bring in 60-plus players. You know who they play first game at The Rock. He'll host Jeff Levy and Mississippi State. Southern Miss, MSU, Labor Day weekend at The Rock. Back for hour number 3.
Say, kids, what time is it?
It's 9 a.m. and this ain't okay show. It's the Out of Bounds Show with Bo Bounds.
On aboard!
As Mississippi's #1 morning show rolls on the Zone 105.9 and online at thezone1059.com.
Oh, good morning. Welcome into the Out of Bounds Show. 1059 The Zone, ESPN. Book your stay and play right now. DancingRabbitGolf.com. DancingRabbitGolf.com. Ton of fun. Drew in Atlanta talked about meeting his dad at Pearl River Resort and Dancing Rabbit Golf Club for the Ole Miss LSU game. Drew lives in Atlanta and listens to the show. Thank you, Drew, by the way, for streaming the show on the Out of Bounds radio app or thezone1059.com. The Charles Huff interview was fabulous. That's brought to you by DancingRabbitGolf.com. Book your stay and play right now. Also, Spring Street Cigars in Hattiesburg and Bocoma, not but a few minutes from Hattiesburg. Bocoma, right outside of Laurel, Casino and Sportsbook, part of the Pearl River Resort family. Bocoma, right outside of Laurel. The Charles Huff interview was fantastic. He's flipping that roster, and you could have an absolute war on Saturday, Labor Day weekend, Mississippi State at Southern Miss. Very difficult for me to handicap either one, to be honest with you, when you have that many new players. It just is. I mean, Huff's talking about, basically 65, 70 players, new players, and 12 to 15 high school guys. And, Mark Butler, who is Jeff Levy's GM, they brought in a running ton of players, and I referenced that earlier. That's 33 players plus signees, 20 some odd, so 53, 58. But, roughly they could add a couple of more. You may want to round that to 60 at Mississippi State, so maybe bringing back 25 guys with 60 new faces. I think the one thing, that happened was Mark Butler came in from Ohio State, and he got to see, what they were able to do. And obviously Ohio State's spending $20 million. Mississippi State's going to spend over $10 million on this roster. What that gets you, I don't know. But Butler's done a good, I have been critical of some of the things, and justifiably so, right, of some of the things that Levy and even Selman have done early, but I will give Butler and Levy credit. I think they've done everything they can do in the portal. They're ranked 16th. They're bringing in 33 new guys. They brought in a lot more beef on the O-line and D-line. That's the worst defensive line in my lifetime. Now, I want you to think about that. That was the worst defensive line since I've been alive at Mississippi State this past year. Now, some of that, I didn't understand Butler not come. I would have hired Butler and made sure that he was there on December 1. He didn't get there until January 2nd or 3rd, and that was after the first portal window had closed, which is the bulk of the players. Having said that, it looks like Butler and Levy have a much better game plan as far as the portal this year. QB room looks good, depth. I think that they'll take a step back at wide receiver because, Keon Coleman's unreal. And they'll be better at running back. Of course, you had to be. Yeah. They'll be better on the offensive line. You had to be. And they'll be much better on the D-line, but I don't know what that means. Because what the SEC did to Mississippi State and a couple other look at Oklahoma's stretch. I was looking at that yesterday. Jackson and I had the helmet schedules up. And Oklahoma's 4-game gauntlet is staggering. I mean, what they did for Texas as far as scheduling is amazing. And what they did to Oklahoma is just criminal. But what they did to Mississippi State is criminal. Florida, MSU, Oklahoma, and who's the fourth one that had a brutal schedule? Florida, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, maybe Georgia. But, Georgia's Georgia.
Yeah.
They're loaded and winning and all of that. I mean, I understand they took a big step back last year. I don't know if they're going to be, that much. Is everybody chasing Texas? Or, now that Texas home schedule kind of flips, we'll see. We'll see. Is Texas the most talented team in the league? Yes. Is it by like some kind of big margin? No. Is Arch, the difference maker in this? Possibly, but I would also look to line of scrimmage. And my God, look what Sark did at the skill position. Georgia has regressed bad at wide receiver and running back. Who would have thought that? Even when Georgia wasn't living up to what they should have done in the 90s under Jim Donnan and in the 2000s under Mark Richt, they still, they put NFL QBs in the league like Jackson and I, smash crawfish at Mudbugs.
Right.
In their sleep. Our running backs, I think I said, well, they put QBs in the league, but running backs is what I meant. They were running back forever. And, they had their worst rushing game in 25 years last year. So, anyway, what the SEC did scheduling-wise to Mississippi State and Oklahoma and Florida is criminal. But the other teams in the league are like, we don't care.
Yeah.
Tennessee, Ole Miss, Missouri, and Texas, they're like, we love it. We're going to take advantage. And Texas and Tennessee punched their ticket to the college football playoff last year. And Ole Miss had a good year, but came up short in the big stuff.
How does that play out over there in Birmingham? Like, did the SEC not do them a favor, or did they somehow mismanagement and not do themselves a favor here, like with scheduling?
No, the SEC did the schedule.
Okay, so it's all.
They said they took an algorithm from the 5 years prior to that. It was the biggest bunch of the discrepancy or the difficulty as far as index, if you will, as far as Oklahoma, Florida, Mississippi State, and I can't remember the other team compared to Tennessee, Ole Miss, Texas, and Missouri is absurd. It is. Let me go through Texas real quick this year. What are they doing? They did this at Ohio State.
Yeah,
but
right.
If we're talking about, I'm not talking about non-conference. I'm talking about conference.
Okay, yeah.
We're talking about conference. Texas plays at Florida. That's not a gimme.
No.
Oklahoma and Dallas. At Kentucky. At Mississippi State. So they'll be favored by Vanderbilt at home. So think about that 3-game stretch. Even though Vanderbilt's better, Diego Pavia, will struggle to put the whole thing on his back, even though he beat Bama last year in Nashville. Obviously, Bama had taken but they were still good.
Yeah.
Okay. At Kentucky, dub. At Mississippi State, W. Vanderbilt home, W. But now it gets heated up. Remember, Georgia went there last year and won.
Right.
Kirby lost in Tuscaloosa and lost in Oxford.
Right.
They go to Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then they have Arkansas at home and A&M at home. Very, very manageable.
Wow.
For the Texas Longhorns. Ole Miss has 8 home games. They start off with Georgia State, 70-0, and then they go to Kentucky. Kentucky was their only win last year in the SEC. They beat Ole Miss in Oxford. Mm-hmm. Going to Kentucky. Will Kentucky be better? You would think they had to be because they were god-awful last year.
Don't have a choice.
But that'll be Austin Simmons on the road. The one thing that Kentucky can do at times is what? With Brad White, defensive coordinator. Play D. They don't believe in playing offense, but those dudes can play D. So we'll see. And then Ole Miss plays Arkansas at home. The Fighting Sam Pittmans. And then Tulane at home and then LSU at home. They have 8 home games.
Wow.
People are going to have to start taking stuff for their liver now to get through 8 home games. What's Patrick Kelly going to do at Finch and Kelly other than make money?
Get a new liver.
He gets another home game, which is probably like $40,000 through his cash register, which I love. Back in a second. Oh, man. Yeah. That was the worst defensive line of my lifetime. I'm 51. That was the worst defensive line at Mississippi State of my lifetime. That wasn't a G5 D line. That was, oh, hell, let me think about that for a second. Trying to think of some like D3 teams. Like University of Tampa. Yeah, maybe Florida International. I mean, they've been garbage forever. Yeah, it was a Florida. I think that's fair. It was a Florida International type D line. Yeah. I don't know. You know, did you have anybody that weighed over 260? I mean, I don't think you had anybody that could start at Southern Miss. Obviously, it's a different roster now. I'm talking about last year. I mean, Charles Huff at Southern Miss has upgraded the roster. But, yeah, it's the worst Hail State D-line I've ever seen in my life. Now, also, Coleman Hutzler, the way they lined up schematically, and I am not a DC, okay? But I do like to put people, you know, like on both sides of the line.
Right.
Or both ends, right? I want some people on the left and the right side if I'm sitting there at linebacker. You know, I get that Coleman Hutzler didn't have a lot to work with. Also, what they were trying to do schematically was scary. We'll see if Paul Rhodes, former head coach DC, and Mike McIntyre, former head coach DC, and again, McIntyre coached at Ole Miss. Hell, he won the big, what was it then? The Pac-12, Pac-10, Pac-12 at Colorado, coached with Parcells. You know, we'll see how much say they have. I don't know why you couldn't just name one of them DC, but
right.
I guess you couldn't do that. Other teams make shrewd moves and are always trying to advance in a big way.
Yeah, why do you say you can't do that?
What now?
Why do you say you can't do that?
Mississippi State has been notorious for making up barriers and putting them in front of them.
Okay.
It's incredible. It's like letting go of the Lamonis last week.
Okay.
Do you ever want to let go of do you ever want to? No. But you still have people in the Mississippi State. I mean, it's the Starkville Cafe mentality.
Right.
And by the way, Starkville Cafe is a good place.
Yeah,
to eat. I'm just talking about the last three generations that have held Starkville back.
Sure.
There. People that would be 55, 85, and 115 years old. Right. You get what I'm saying.
Okay.
So it's the Starkville Cafe mentality. Chris Lamonis was let go on Monday, and Mississippi State people think, "Oh my God, we can't do that." Well, the hell you can.
Right.
You got stockholders and stakeholders that you needed a new voice in the locker room. I mean, they may not win another game the rest of the year, but you needed a new voice. I mean, this series this weekend could go either way. Ole Miss 2-3, Mississippi State 2-3. Missouri, you need to gobble up dubs. But the bottom line is you don't owe anybody any explanation. You owe no one. But it is a group that worries about what other people think when they shouldn't. Who gives a damn? Do what you want. Only worry about yourself. Be ruthless and advance athletically and academically. And I have talked to people who are I just don't know if it was right.
Oh, my gosh.
What are you talking about? I mean, the record was the record.
Yeah.
And so now look, could the administration done some things to help Lamonis? You could make that argument.
Sure.
But the bottom line is it's okay to fire first of all, you can fire your coach whenever the hell you want.
Whenever.
Just like at LSU.
Right.
Arkansas.
He's an employee.
Kentucky. They can do it whenever they want, and that's their deal.
Right.
And this is a loose term, but national baseball media, because we do just as much. I mean, we've had all kinds of people on in the college baseball world. I like Kyle Peterson, by the way, but I'm not worried about what KP thinks or Kendall Rogers. Who cares? And they're welcome to have their opinion, but it doesn't matter. But for some reason, MSU fans want everything all nice and neat, put in a cute little sweet box and everything, and that's just, man, this is a great, you are in the deep end of the pool with a bunch of sharks. Act like it. And
where's that start?
You had every right to fire Chris Lamonis. Not that it's fun. That's not me. I'm not I'm not thinking it's fun and cute and all that. But this is a business, results matter component to this, and your stakeholders deserved better. People who buy suites, lofts, which are $70,000 a year, rigs, plus tickets, and chairbacks deserved more.
Yeah.
And results matter. Okay? So that's where you are.
Would you keep
investing?
investing?
And I don't feel sorry for anybody that gets paid, counting what he's got till June 30th. I mean, I guess he gets another $200,000, and then he gets 1.4 on the buyout. And I wish, Chris may be the next head baseball coach at the University of Houston. He may be the next head baseball coach somewhere. He's going to be, if he wants to be, he'll be employed June 1.
Right.
Now, that's going to count back towards his buyout. But technically, if he just decided to go to Kiowa, which is where he loves to, and I don't blame him, to spend time in Charleston, South Carolina, and just chill and play golf for a year before getting back in it, he would get the full, if you count through June 30th, another couple $100,000, right?
Right.
And then, well, more than that. And then another 1.4 million of a salary. So 99.9% of America, when they're fired, doesn't. I mean, sometimes there's a little bit of a compensation package, but it's not like collegiate athletics where we sign these people to I mean, there's not you don't need to have an athletic director on a 4-year deal. That's dumb. That's what happened that's 2013 thinking or 2007 thinking. Why would an AD need to be on any kind of long-term contract? 2 years is plenty.
2 years.
If, max. When Penn State extended their guy 8 years, $50 million, that reeks of academia and just poor business decision.
Tenure.
Why would he need to be any guaranteed? If he wants to be at Penn State, great. We'll give you a 2-year deal, and that's what you'll be on.
Yeah, that's that.
But you don't owe anyone any apologies for anything that you do athletically or academically. No. But that there is this very non-aggressive, passive, pearl clutching, oh my God, what are people thinking of us mentality. And you just got to burn that damn thing down. You have got to take the gasoline to that. I call it, and you can't make a Starkville Cafe higher. You can't. These people that are running around for Will Coggin, I bet Will can be great at some point.
Yeah.
That is a Joe Moorhead Starkville Cafe mentality.
It is.
Old guard, crusty, crunchy, not seeing the big picture. I can't do it.
No. You're talking about regression.
So, and also, you need to put in your athletic director's contract, every single one forever, from now, whenever this all ends, through eternity.
Okay.
That your AD cannot schedule an away football game at Memphis or Southern Miss.
That'd be smart.
Caveman dumb. You gain nothing for it. Don't tell me about your alumni base in DeSoto County and Memphis. You can go up there and have a steak dinner with people. Okay?
Is that an argument?
You have just beat this to death. You should never play at La Tech, never play at Memphis, never play at Southern Miss, never play at Troy. The only one you should play at is if Tulane will play off campus in the Superdome, because I think they built a new stadium. That's actually fun. But now, as long as John Summerall there, who you could have hired, as long as John Summerall's there, that's even a no.
Yeah.
But it's got to be in the contract, fired immediately, and the AD owes you money. You can't play at Memphis or Southern Miss. Michael Katz, Ole Miss Insider, D-Journal, coming up next. Man, I feel like we're coming in hot. Wow. That was a hell of a guitar riff or something. Damn. Now I'm awake. 2.5 hours into the show. And I had my True Brain, a little bit of coffee. Now I'm ready to roll. You want to do another hour and a half after this segment? Why not? We are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN, brought to you by Tito's Espresso Martini. How's that sound, Jay Meadows? Out on the town tonight. Also, Spring Street Cigars in Jackson is now open. Beautiful cigar bar and lounge. Spring Street Cigars open right there in the building where the Rogue is, I-55 North Frontage Road. 4450 is the address, but it's just south of Highland Village. Beautiful building, elevated. The Rogue and Nukes are in there. Spring Street Cigars open. Full bar, 3 stories, beautiful humidor. They've got Davidoff cigars, along with Rocky Patel and Fuente and Drew Estate and so on. So, Spring Street Cigars in Jackson is open in the building where the Rogue Men's Store is. So we're excited about that. All right, it's time to welcome in Southern Cal alum, Ole Miss Insider, Michael Katz. DJournal.com. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm good, man. Starting with Southern Cal alum. I'm not sure if that's a blessing or a curse these days.
Yeah, I can't figure that out either. Although you landed you landed Baker Mazzara. Did that surprise you that you landed him?
Not really. I've been following Muss for a while, and I know he is very transfer dependent, and especially now. But, it just sort of figures because, I feel like everybody who wasn't an Auburn fan in the SEC was like, man, that guy's really a pain. And now he's mine. So I love him now. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, look, he may be a pain. He's good. Super talented player, man, as you know. I mean, golly, watching him on TV is fun, but I know you saw him live, and I did too this year. Damn, he's good. So y'all have plenty of money. Plenty of 100 millionaires and billionaires, but I'm not sure that y'all pumped in the money that some of the other schools that don't have near as much did early on. Have y'all gotten your stuff to get? I mean, y'all had to pay him. What'd you pay him? $4 million? Have y'all gotten your NIL in order out in Los Angeles at Southern Cal?
It seems that way. I think the biggest indicator for me is that at least with football, they are getting very good recruits again, which has been a very perplexing issue at USC. Recruiting California has been weirdly hard with in the last few years under Lincoln Riley, but they've really sort of gotten that going. They've gotten a bunch of 5 stars recently. So I would have to assume that means the NIL is in order because, as you know, you are not getting high profile guys if the money's not there.
No doubt. All right. Well, let's go to Ole Miss. Michael Katz, Ole Miss Insider. He called it at the right time. Kiffin's been unbelievable. Beard coming off a Sweet 16. Ole Miss is going to a regional. We'll see if they host. See what happens this week against Mississippi State in Starkville, and then they host Auburn at Ole Miss. Are you going to Starkville, or are you going to cover from afar and then cover them the last weekend of the regular season weekend of the series? Cats?
I'll be doing it remotely. I just think the driving there and back three times is just sort of it's kind of a big ask.
Okay. All right. So I got to go football though before we go baseball. What do you make of? We played a 10-minute cut of Lane Kiffin on the Theo Vaughn show, and that cut he was talking about Saban, but he talked about all kinds of things. So he's on this big rehab his image deal. He's already proven that the reboot at Bama paid off because he's one of the top 10 college football coaches in the country. And what he's done at Ole Miss is unprecedented. What do you make of his rehab tour?
I think it's, I mean, it's kind of been going on for a while, in bits and pieces, and now obviously he's been on a lot of national podcasts and shows, and has been more open about it. And obviously, Lane had some demons, and he's very open about those sorts of things and how he got through them. I think like the biggest thing is that, especially with that Theo Vaughn podcast, is I think people are seeing that like he's actually like really funny, and he actually can be like a human being outside of football. I think we just always see him in this context of, we're always asking him these questions about football, and he doesn't want to talk about those things, so you get these like really short answers, and sometimes he'll have a one-liner, and everyone laughs, and then we move on. But I think he's sort of opening up and being a little bit more of the personal side, and I think it's probably been refreshing for fans. I know it's cool for us to see because we don't see it a ton. We know it's in there as reporters, and we see it in bits and pieces. But our job isn't necessarily to always pry that out. We're trying to get answers on things, but
right.
It's been good to see that it's there and that he's embracing it, and hopefully we'll get to see a little bit more of it too.
Okay, let's build on this. Michael Katz, djournal.com. We're talking Lane Kiffin and this new Lane Kiffin, this rehab tour that he's on. So he's pretty stoic, and people tell me that he's pretty socially awkward. They just had a deal at Reunion here recently, and talking to a couple of guys, they were like, I mean, rabid Ole Miss fans, but they're like, dude, he that was not his cup of tea, so to speak, working a room. But when he wants to turn it on, he's in a one-on-one, or he has time to create a tweet, he's money. But he's stoic and socially awkward. Would you say over the last, how long have you been covering him, Katz?
Let's see. It'll be 4 years in July.
Damn, that's a long time. Okay. Would you, so going from stoic and socially awkward, and all of them are on edge at times. That's fine. No big deal. Depending on what's going on, the ebb and flow of the season and so on. But would you say he's softer, warmer than he was 4 years ago?
I don't know if I'd say like softer, because like you said, he still does have somewhat of a guard up, because again, it's the Saban thing in terms of like, you don't want to give too much away about your program, and like, let's be honest, like, he doesn't necessarily want to talk about specifics on his football team on a weekly basis, so you're kind of going to get what you're going to get there. But I do think that he is a lot more comfortable in the room, and, particularly in talking about bigger issues. That is something that he's sort of become like a spokesman on certain things, on NIL and the portal and all these sorts of things. When there's big picture stuff, he is about as good as it gets, because he's very thoughtful. He has a message he's trying to put out too, to recruits and to potential targets and all that kind of stuff.
And to alums.
Absolutely.
That's where he's brilliant, Katz. He's really, really, really good at that. And, I asked him a couple weeks ago, about the Nico Iamaleava stuff. And at first he was kind of like, well, I don't know if I really want to talk. It's not really, I don't think it's really fair to talk about it. But in saying the things that he said, he actually gave a really, really good answer about how, there's this, 19, 20-year-old taking shots from everybody when we don't really necessarily have all the answers. And, that's not really fair. And so, he, again, in giving a sort of non-answer, he ended up giving a really, really good answer on, like, the most important topic in college football. So he is incredible when it comes to big picture outside of his specific program stuff. I don't think he loves talking about, what's the game plan this week against so and so. That's never going to be something he's going to be super open about. But when you ask him about the bigger issues surrounding the sport, he is about as good as it gets. I couldn't agree more.
Gotten better at that. Yeah,
I think you nailed it. He is either number one or right there when it comes to articulating and laying out his thoughts on the big issues in collegiate athletics and college football portal NIL. And I think you hit on something there, Katz. When in a long podcast form with Theo Vaughn, that gives him an opportunity to get his message out and articulate, and it's not a bang bang thing in a 7-minute press conference. You agree with that?
Absolutely. I think sometimes to like fully appreciate the things that he's saying, or to really understand them, like he needs to talk it out, right? Like I think that he needs to sort of get going. And so I think, when you give him a chance to give those sort of long form answers, I think that's really, he's really at his best. And I think a podcast is probably no better example of that, when he can really, sink his teeth into the topic and really explain himself and get the message out there that he wants out there and that he wants people to hear. Again, I think that's when he's at his best.
Yeah, that, and like we were talking about alums, there are so many times where, and you're in the room, but I watch a lot of his. I mean, he's radio gold and content gold for both of us, because he's so weird and wacky and also brilliant, and like you said, in long form stuff and Twitter, he can really nail the message that he's trying to deliver. But I think you picked up on this. The last few years, he's also talking to alums, Ole Miss alums, when he's talking about the portal, because he's basically saying, hey, we have to invest more. We have to raise more money if we want to compete at a high level. Do you see that? Do you agree with that, Katz?
Yeah, and I think part of, you look around the country, and I think all coaches are sort of doing this now, right? They have to, but I think they do it in different ways. Some coaches are very direct and like, we need more money, and that like kind of comes off the wrong way, right? That's right. Not what people want to hear. They want to hear like, oh my gosh, it sounds like we're poor, and now he's begging. Like no one wants to hear that. Lane is really, really good about being subtle about it and sort of coding the message through different things. But you understand what he's trying to say. And he doesn't directly say, hey, we need you guys to step up, because that sounds kind of accusatory and, all that sort of thing. He doesn't necessarily always go with that. He doesn't tend to do that. I think he's a lot more subtle in saying that, hey, like, this is how college football is now. This is the way it is. I don't think it's right. But it's free agency, and this is just sort of the hand we're dealt. And he sort of lays it out there in a way that you're sort of like, okay, yeah, I guess, if you're an alum, you see where he's coming from, and you understand what he is saying without him explicitly saying, we need your money.
Yeah. Michael Katz, djournal.com, on the Out of Bounds show, talking Lane Train. And, I mean, there's something else that I pick up too. He wants so bad for Saban to, I think, recognize, because it is true. I mean, Lane is now a top 10 coach, but I think a lot of Lane's run at Alabama was really, really good to modernize their offense, and then a lot of it was a train wreck. And so don't you get the sense that he really wants Saban to recognize that he flipped the script and turned the corner and has turned into this top 10 coach in college football, Katz?
I think the problem with it, though, is that's just not how Saban is like really wired in terms of like, he's not going to hand out the huge compliment on, wow, like I am so proud of him, blah, blah, blah. That just hasn't been the guy that he's been over, 25 years or whatever it's been. And, he's always been very complimentary of Lane when you ask him about it. And he said, yeah, he really turned our offense around, and he's a brilliant mind and all that stuff. But I don't know. I feel like he's always sort of stayed away from the personal stuff, because that's just, I don't know. It just kind of seems like it's a Saban thing. I also think what's probably kind of tough is, I know Lane and Steve Sarkisian are very close from their time at SC, and they were both at Bama. I think they overlapped a little bit there. But, obviously, Sark has taken Texas to the playoff, and, they're sort of the golden child. Sark's kind of become like the golden child of the Saban assistants. So,
yeah,
it's not like jealousy or anything, but I think it's probably harder for Lane to, sort of maybe get the credit because Sark has turned Texas around in such a way that, when Texas is quote unquote back, college football it just feels a little bit different.
Yes.
And maybe in a way that, Ole Miss isn't going to get that sort of hype or credit most of the time. So I think it's, it's not like Saban is saying great things about Sark and not about Lane. I think Saban plays it, or at least from what I've seen, has always played it pretty similarly in terms of, he has, a lot of appreciation for them. And he's always said the right thing about those guys. But I think the timing of Sark really sort of exploding on the scene has made it maybe a little bit more difficult for Lane to get the credit that he's probably due.
No, I agree with you. I agree because Texas is a monster, and Sark's done a great job. Lane would be doing the same thing. I mean, if you drop Lane at Texas or LSU, watch out. I mean, you're talking about national championship run. He's that good. Okay, so let's go with Michael Katz, djournal.com, on the Out of Bounds show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN, brought to you by Tito's Martini with 3 olives tonight. Katz is going to have one on the square because he's so excited for doing this interview. Let's talk 2025 schedule. It's still unbelievable. I mean, I thought Ole Miss had an unbelievable schedule last year, and they did. And he was either number 1 or number 2 in the SEC as far as EOS, ease of schedule. This year they got 8 home games, and they play Washington State at home, which could be a massacre. So now, I think some teams are going to be better, Kat, and I don't think Ole Miss is going to be as good. But their schedule could still drive them to 9-3. How about that? So Kentucky's upgraded, but they're still not that good. Now, I think Oklahoma, LSU, and Florida could take a step forward, Cats. I really do, with what they've done recruiting and portal-wise. And 2 of the 3 are bringing back quarterbacks that played really well in Nussmeier and DJ Lagway, who I really like both of them. How do you see it? You agree, disagree with that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and then when you look at Oklahoma, they brought in, until Nico entered the portal, Mateer from Washington State was like maybe the best quarterback in the portal, and Oklahoma brought him in, and they brought in this new kind of high-flying offense because, the offense was a bit of a problem last year at least. I think they're going to be improving. Again, that game is in Norman. That's not going to be a walk in the park. But, I think that, like, you looked at the schedule last year, and it was extremely manageable, and this year you get the same vibes. Obviously at Georgia, that's going to be tough. Especially with how last year's game went. South Carolina, they've got one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC in Lenore Sellers. I know they lost a lot from last year's very talented team, but I think they're going to be pretty good. Again, you brought up Lagway. I think he is going to be a superstar. He did a lot of great things against Ole Miss last year. But, again, like, I think so much of college football is, and you hate to say it, but it's like sometimes you just need the breaks to go your way, right?
Yeah.
Like last year, they lose 3 games by 13 points, and like the Kentucky one was pretty inexplicable.
Right.
Like that loss can't happen to a team that went 4-8, whatever they ended up being. I mean, that was kind of mind blowing. And then LSU, you lose on a game you never trailed in until the very last play of overtime, and then. And obviously, the Florida game was Trey Harris gets hurt partway through, and everything sort of falls apart. And Dart has a really rough, end of that game. You look at the year before when they went 11-2. Everything with a harder schedule went right for them at the end of games. Last year, everything kind of seemed to go wrong for them at the end of games, even though last year's team was leaps and bounds, I think, better. Than the 2023 one. I don't think there's any question.
Absolutely.
That was that was top 3 in scoring offense and scoring defense. I mean, that's pretty remarkable to have that sort of balance. And so, they aren't going to be, at least as of right now, from our perspective, maybe as veteran talented as they were last year. I mean, they had a pretty special portal class. When you bring in all-American guys like Walter Nolan and Princely Maniel, you feel pretty good about it. And when you bring back Dart and all those weapons, I think you like your odds. It's going to be a very different looking team this year. I think they're still really talented, and I think it's a different type of talent. Obviously the portals was huge for them again, but they've also, they're going to be depending on some guys who are those homegrown recruits that are finally stepping into bigger roles, and I think that's going to be really big for them. But I guess that's a long way of saying, like, I think that this schedule, like you said, like 9-3, 8-4, if things break right like they did in 2023, 10-2 is possible. I just think that things have to kind of go their way, but I think the talent is there for this team to be. They're not going to be nearly as highly ranked as they were last year, right? They were top 6, I think, last year in the preseason polls. Right. That's not going to be the case this year, and it shouldn't be. There's a lot of unknowns with them, but I think that they are really, really talented, and that this schedule is going to give them a chance to be in the conversation.
I agree with that. I don't, at Kentucky game 2, is Ole Miss better? Yes. Is Kiffin light years better than Stoops? Yes. But the one thing that Kentucky has is Brad White, defensive coordinator, and he's a little freak. So that may, Ole Miss has done a good job. Like last year, they didn't play anybody till game 5, as you know. And so this year, not that Kentucky's good, but you can't take anything for granted on the road, especially that early, Katz. Even though Austin's super talented, you don't ever know what's going to go on when you get on an airplane and get in another stadium. All right, dude. All right, real quick, 30 seconds. Do you think Ole Miss hosts a regional?
It's going to be really, really close because I do think they're going to have good. This is famous last words. I think they're going to have a good last couple weekends. I think they will be very, very close. I don't know if it's going to happen because I think they dug themselves in a little bit of a hole with a couple series losses, but I think they'll be very close.
Okay. All right, man. You going back to LA this summer?
Yes. In when? End of June.
Good for you.
Yeah, very, very, very excited to go to take a little vacation.
Good for you, man. Yeah, you've been busy. I mean, big bowl game, Sweet 16. We'll see what Bianco does down the stretch. All right, Katz. Thank you, my man. Be good.
Appreciate you, man.
Michael Katz, Southern Cal alum, Baker Mazzara's #1 fan, also Ole Miss Insider, djournal.com. And he joined us on the Out of Bounds show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, brought to you by one of Jackson Meadows' favorite spots, Aplos and the Renaissance and Aplos in Highland Village. Enjoy a Tito's and lemonade and a few gyros and some parm fries and Lebanese rolls. Aplos at Highland Village, Aplos in the Renaissance. We'll see you tomorrow. Oh, Mudbugs is open today through Sunday. Best crawfish in Mississippi.